What is going on, you guys? My name is Cody Thixton, and this is a Just New Podcast. Coming to you guys on December 10th, 2023 for episode 82, where today we have a very, very special guest. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I upload content. Make sure to go and follow me on social media at CodyT503. That's Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Let's get right into this. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Sam BILYEU.
Thank you. You're far too kind.
How's it going tonight, sir?
It's going pretty good. Just got a shower in, relaxing, heading back into work tomorrow, so taking the day easy.
Nice. That's what's up, man. Well, thank you so very much for actually joining us here today. It's going to be really awesome to kind of pick apart your mind for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man. So, maybe if you could maybe introduce yourself to maybe anybody who doesn't know you or where you're from and maybe where you train at.
Sounds good. My name is Sam BILYEU, born and raised in the Portland area in Oregon. Normally spend my days either at work. I work at a hospital here in the Portland area, but whenever we have a wrestling show nearby, if I'm not busy, I'm usually working ring crew and security at those. More often at the prestige shows, like we got one coming up in January. You'll definitely be seeing me there. And I'm currently on a bit of a hiatus from training full-time, but when I was training, I was at the Oregon Pro Wrestling School out in Hillsboro, run by Midnight Heat, Ricky Gibson, and Eddie Pearl. But taking a break from it now because last year I tore my PCL running a drill during training and then managed to avoid surgery for that, fortunately. But a few months after that, I was then doing some jumping exercises, which ended with me hurting my knee again, but this time tearing like a bunch of tendons in the kneecap, which was loud enough that Ricky was standing off to the side, and even he looks at me and goes, "That didn't sound good." So got my knee checked out again with my physical therapist, and he said, "So good news is it doesn't sound like, from what you're saying, how it feels, it doesn't need surgery still, but just be careful with it, keep rehabbing it, keep exercising it." And I still go into physical therapy every couple weeks.
That's really crazy. Well, but before we start to maybe expand a little bit more on that. So you just said that you work in a hospital. So what exactly do you do for the local Portland area?
So at my job at the hospital, I'm a secretary. So I'm usually answering phone calls, handling paperwork, assisting with any sort of non-medical nursing needs. Like if, say, a patient needs help getting to the restroom, I'll help with that. If a nurse needs help taking care of a patient and they just need help moving them, I'll hop in and help with that. But as far as giving meds, checking blood sugars, nope. Don't ask me. I couldn't if I wanted to. I'm not poking any patients. I won't do it. You can't make me.
Oh, that is awesome. So how is that kind of translated with how you kind of view professional wrestling? Because you had just brought up that when you heard something, it was oh no, that's not good. So how is it having that I guess knowledge of the anatomy kind of correlate with what you were able to actually witness as a pro wrestler?
It's definitely changed how I react when watching wrestling, not only having injured myself a couple times just in training, but also working at a hospital where I see even worse things happen to people, because I have also worked on other units like the post-surgical unit, and it's definitely taken a toll mentally, just feeling like anytime I'm watching a match and I see someone land wrong, I immediately just go, ooh, that's definitely going to hurt in the morning. So I have no actual formal medical training. So if you ask me hey, what's a good way to take care of this? Or, hey, how does this look? I'm going to be like, I don't know. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. So like when you were actually going to Oregon Pro Wrestling School, I know I usually typically ask this question to everybody who goes there, but like what was that first day like for you? Like what was going through your mind as you woke up and was like, I'm gonna go and I'm actually gonna either try out or sign up?
Oh, geez. From the moment I started getting dressed to go to training my first day, my heart did not slow down for a second. Like my head was racing, my heart was racing. I was like, oh my God, I'm actually going to start training to be a pro wrestler today. Because I'd met some of the students, I'd met Ricky before I started training. So I kind of knew some of the people when I was walking in. Like it wasn't like a, hey, I'm Sam, nice to meet you all. Some of them looked at me and went, didn't I see you at the show the other day? I've definitely met you before, haven't I? But yeah, I was somewhere between absolutely excited and absolutely terrified at the same time, thinking, oh my God, this is actually happening. And oh my God, what if something bad happens? Because
Yeah.
part of the waiver does say you may get seriously hurt doing this, and we are not liable for this. Whatever happens is your responsibility.
That's
So,
crazy. So
yeah, that
when did you first meet Ricky? Was that when he was a part of 4 Minutes of Heat or the Midnight Heat?
I first heard of Ricky when he was in 4 Minutes of Heat because he did the whole followed me on Instagram. I followed him, and then a while later, I looked back and noticed, wait, he's not following me anymore. He he did the whole try to get someone to follow you so that you get more followers on your account, but I don't care what this weirdo has to post on his Instagram. But which no, I love Ricky to death. He's an awesome dude. It was just funny to me that I was like, wait a minute, my first interaction with this guy was the classic bait and switch. Try to get this guy to follow me. Oh, I'm not following him anymore. But my
Yeah.
first time actually meeting him, he was already in Midnight Heat with the whole shaved head, clean shaven beard look, entering to that awesome track that he and Eddie entered to. And
Yeah.
I had emailed him first, interested in going to the school, but I don't think he had any clue what I actually looked like. So when I walked up to him to introduce myself, he had a, hey, how's it going, man? And then I told him, hey, I'm Sam. I'm the guy who emailed you about going to the school. And he goes, oh, yeah, yeah. Good to see you. Nice to meet you. Eddie was a
Oh,
completely different story, though, because even after I started training there for a week, my second week there, we moved to another location, and Eddie was actually there for the big move. But we had a prestige wrestling show a while later, and as Eddie is hearing Ricky talk to some of my buddies about how I'm doing in training, Eddie looks at Ricky and goes, wait, who are you talking about? Because he'd even seen me at the school. I think that one day we were both there, but he was just like, wait, who is this? When did we get a new student? So I went out of my way to introduce myself to Eddie, like, hey, I'm Sam, the new guy that you heard Ricky talking about.
that is that is really interesting to kind of get that little insight from. Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I've had a few interactions with some other pro wrestlers. It's kind of like going like kind of like through that where like I know I'll even drop it, but Conan, you know who Conan is.
Oh, yeah.
I had messaged him and I had asked him like, hey, like would you possibly be interested in being interviewed and whatnot? And it kind of seemed like at first like an automated message where he would kind of like tell you like, hey, tomorrow I'm going to be, doing my podcast and where are you from? What's your name? I'll shout you out and all of that and whatever, and then like I sent him back another message and then it came back like the same exact message again. And I was like really dog, like, come on. It's so interesting that like that will actually like happen,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like what was here's a question. So like what was one thing that you kind of learned from the Midnight Heat before it came to you actually going into training?
Oh, I think one thing that I really learned from them before I actually started training with them was it's not a bad thing to be a quote comedy heel, because a lot of the stuff they'll do is still funny and it'll still make me laugh after seeing it 20 times. But they're still like being billed as one of the top tag teams in the area, as much as they'll say they're the top tag team. I think they've got some stiff competition going into this next year. But it's still funny to me growing up watching pro wrestling and thinking, oh, he's the comedy heel guy. He's just here to make people laugh and get his butt kicked. But then you see people like Midnight Heat who are making people laugh, but then they win matches and they win championships. They had three tag team championships at one time, which they would carry to every show they went. They had one belt in each hand and another belt around their waist. So they're definitely winning. Whatever they're doing is working. And so that's what really caught my attention, was like, oh, these guys are showing me that wrestling is whatever wrestling is. You can make it whatever you want to. It doesn't have to be, oh, these rules are all set in stone. If you're making people laugh, you're not making money. If you're making people laugh, you're not winning championships. And then watching Midnight Heat was like, no, that's not the case anymore. You do have a lot to learn from these guys.
Yeah. Yeah. So like when did you actually like begin to watch professional wrestling? Like when did it really like draw your attention as like, I want to do this one day?
Oh, geez. For me, that was, I think I was 11 when I started watching wrestling full time. It was right after No Way Out 2006, seeing Rey Mysterio, who I immediately thought looked like a real life Spider-Man with the mask and the colorful outfits he wore. And just seeing how many different people there were. Like there were smaller guys like Rey Mysterio. There were bigger guys like Bobby Lashley. There were more medium-sized guys like Eddie Guerrero, who were all doing completely different styles of wrestling, or like CM Punk does a completely different style of wrestling from another guy who's the exact same size as him. And only seeing that progress further over the years, to the point that you see someone like Kevin Owens, who is not built like the same wrestlers I grew up watching, yet he does a senton bomb off the top rope, which is one thing I absolutely love about wrestling, is seeing people who are doing these crazy things when they look like they should absolutely not be able to do these crazy things.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know during No Way Out 2006, I think that was when Randy Orton kind of put on the line with Rey Mysterio his WrestleMania opportunity. And so, like, after that whole match, I think it was the next week on SmackDown, Teddy Long came out and said that, you know, it would be a triple threat match between Kurt Angle and Randy Orton and Rey Mysterio. So like what was going through your mind when like you had watched that event and then had that news break to everybody that it would actually be a triple threat match?
That was crazy to me. One, because I immediately knew, oh, Randy is going to be pissed about this, because he was saying, no, I won the match. I get the WrestleMania match. You're just trying to screw me over like you always do. But in my head, I thought, you think of a world champion, you think of guys like Hulk Hogan, John Cena, Randy Savage, or Kurt Angle, who was the champion at the time, like these really big, strong, intense guys. And then you see 5.5 foot tall Rey Mysterio, and you think, oh, there's no way that this guy could win the world championship. It just wouldn't happen. And then lo and behold, fast forward to WrestleMania, Rey Mysterio becomes world champion. And I'm just like, what did I just see? What happened?
Yeah, and especially like the whole story building up to that about him, you know, dedicating everything to Eddie Guerrero and knowing their history with each other, like leading throughout 2005 and then going into 2006. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that was one of Michael Cole's best calls, was when he said dreams do come true.
Mhm.
But
So, like,
anyway,
what was your, I guess, like, family environment kind of growing up and, like, kind of being into professional wrestling? Was there any of your other family members that would kinda sit there and watch it with you?
just my little brother was also in it. He was at the show that Adam Copeland debuted for AEW. So he and I have kind of been off and on wrestling fans together ever since we both started watching back in 2006. But otherwise, like my mom hated it because she's a nurse, so she hates any sort of violence like that. And my dad was surrounded by wrestling fans when he was my age. Some of his buddies called him Arn Anderson because he has a very similar big, stocky build to him. So as soon as my brother and I started watching, he was like, "Oh God, I'm surrounded by it again. I'm never gonna get rid of wrestling." So it was much more of a my parents just tolerated it while my brother and I were absolutely falling in love with it.
Yeah, that is so cool. So, like, when you're actually like before you were going into training, like, what were some professional wrestlers that like you mostly looked up to when you were a little bit younger and growing up?
When I was a kid, some of my favorites were guys like Undertaker was one of my favorites. I liked Rey Mysterio, even though me being my size and him being his size, it felt more like I'm watching a Spider-Man superhero like character. But the people I actually felt more of a connection to were guys like Undertaker, Kane, Edge back then because he was doing the whole rock star look, and I was still trying to do the whole rock star look even back then. So I always felt more of an affinity for bigger guys because even though WWE celebrates their big guys, for me it felt like I was outcast in school because I was the tallest kid in school. People treated me more like that monster that kind of just hangs out by the walls. My nickname in high school was Shrek, if that paints you a better picture. So just being able to watch wrestling and see that no, the big guys are really cool and celebrated. They're not, oh, that big guy that don't get too close, he might snap you in half.
Yeah.
Or in other cases, because I was such a teddy bear back then, people would actually pick up on that and be like, oh, if you pick on Sam, nothing's going to happen. He's not going to hurt you. So you can take out your frustrations on him and it'll be fine. After a while, it's not fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's damn. Like I don't really know how to actually like respond to that. Like I'm sorry that you had to go through that and everything. I just
Mm.
I want to ask you about how it feels where let's say like you get back into everything and you actually get to portray this certain personality where like you said, like once you're in a wrestling ring it no longer means anything like that, like nobody's going to look at you like that. And so it's like, how does it feel to be able to adapt maybe this separate personality as compared to maybe what you go through personally?
Um, that's a good question because I mean, I don't go through anything like that these days. People tend to look at me and think, oh, it's not a giant monster, it's a giant teddy bear. But but I've had a couple ideas on whether to use my size to actually emphasize that whole oh he's big he's a monster character. Like seriously, don't mess with me. I will break you in half if I decide to. Or to emphasize more of my playful, goofy side to get all that energy out in the ring. Like, especially with some of my other friends who are in wrestling, we've talked about doing stuff together, coming up with ideas on how do we create more of a playful environment in the ring, as opposed to if I'm on my own, okay, I'm a big guy, I'm going out there by myself. How do I send a message that, hey, I'm not here to play, I'm here to hurt people.
Yeah.
I'm here to win.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, like, can do you know ever like any maybe possibility of you stepping back into the ring?
Oh yeah, that's the plan, which I really appreciate about my physical therapist I'm going to, because he's not helping me rehab my knee in spite of pro wrestling. He's helping me rehab my knee for pro wrestling. Our main goal is get Sam back into the ring, get him back into training, and have him actually get a match by this time next year.
Nice.
Yeah.
That
I
is
don't know.
awesome.
I don't know how well it'll happen, obviously, because plans always change. So my plan right now is to just do the best I can with what I'm given.
Yeah. Yeah. So like what was like one of like your first ever professional wrestling shows? And what was the environment like to you as you were soaking that whole experience in?
First big pro wrestling show, I went to a SmackDown when I was 14, and that was very surreal, getting to feel like, well, I'm actually in the show. I get the ring is right there. Like Edge and Jeff Hardy are right there. I can see them with my own two eyes. It's not a TV screen. They're actually standing in front of me. And just feeling the energy from the crowd around me was a very crazy experience,
Yeah.
especially compared to about 5 years ago. I went to my first independent pro wrestling show. It was a prestige show out in Hermiston, and feeling the much more close environment, because like it was a much smaller crowd, but it was a very, very excited crowd because these are people who absolutely love pro wrestling. So it felt like a much stronger connection. Like these are people who don't care about just going to the big WWE shows at the Rose Garden. These are people who will go to a small warehouse in Hermiston, Oregon to watch people do what they love to do.
Yeah. So like what would you say in your own words, kind of like to like coordinate with that is like maybe like another addition to that that separates the major leagues from the indies?
Um, I feel like the major leagues, like with WWE shows, you'll hear the story of the parent takes their kids to the wrestling show because they know that's what they love, but then someone will come out and they'll ask, okay, who's that person? Who's that guy? Or who are those people? But then you see people at an indie show, they're so invested in wrestling that they're immediately like, oh, this guy is like a wrestling demonic clown, or this guy is wants to be a reality TV star, and this is his way of trying to get on the camera. All right, I'm all in. And they have more of that insider knowledge of, okay, this is what pro wrestling is, and we recognize, okay, this person's the good guy, we cheer him. This person's the bad guy, we boo him.
Yeah. So like if you were to get to a certain point where fans really interacted with you, would you want to be a heel or a baby face?
That's a really tough one. I feel like it would be easier to be a baby face personally, because I could just always relax, be an easygoing guy, be happy to see people interact with me. But I feel like I would actually have more fun being a heel. And if someone interacts with me, just be like, get away from me. I ain't got time.
Oh, that is so awesome. Yeah, it reminds me of dang, I forget his name, but he said that like heels live forever. Like you can be a baby face, but heels live forever. And like that's just like so interesting to sometimes kind of look at when you're looking at professional wrestling, where it's like when somebody is a heel, like let's look at Edge back in, around that time. He was absolutely amazing as a heel, and it's so memorable because of that. So like I don't know, I just think that that's crazy.
Mhm. Yeah, he's
So like
definitely one
what was
that will stick around forever because of his whole conniving, manipulating, trying to get the easy way out in any situation.
yeah. Yeah, so like what were some of your favorite matches throughout all of pro wrestling history?
Ooh, um, that's a tough one. One that I have to get out of the way is Armageddon, when it was Triple H versus Edge versus Jeff Hardy when Jeff finally won the WWE Championship. Because he was another guy I really related to, because he was kind of the weirdo who wore the dark clothes, painted his face, had long hair, which was most of my wardrobe throughout high school was black jeans, black shirt, maybe a flannel or plaid button shirt over the top, long hair every single day. So getting to see him actually win the big one and once again feel validated, like, no, this guy is someone I relate to, and now he's the one with the big gold championship belt on top of the castle. So weirdos get to be celebrated too.
Yeah,
but
yeah, you can definitely see that in the like if you look at like his rivalry with Matt Hardy at WrestleMania 25 when they had the whole promo, and then you heard JR say like, you know, Jeff Hardy, like Jeff Hardy has realized a dream of a lifetime. Like it just gives you like just straight goosebumps. Like it is so awesome. And so it's like was there any other moment that was like maybe like really like jaw dropping for you where you just could not believe what you were actually witnessing?
For me, some of them were looking back at, like, speaking of Edge, his match with Mick Foley at WrestleMania, more for different reasons, just because he speared Mick through the ropes straight through a table that had just been lit on fire. And just realizing none of that is fake, as much as people say wrestling is fake. That was 100% real. Edge just singed his eyebrows off, and he's not wearing a shirt. Or some other crazy ones. Usually the crazy stunts, like Shane falling off a high place, like the 2 times that he did it to both Undertaker and Kevin Owens in their Hell in a Cell matches, and both times he misses and just falls straight through the announce table. It's just feeling like, dude, Shane, you're not a young man anymore. You could actually die. Your kids are watching.
Yeah. Yeah, here's a really interesting perspective. So like I had been talking with Draven Vargas, and we talked about how there was that one match with Sammy and Matt Hardy in AEW, and they were up on like the scaffolding, and then Sammy kind of like, I don't know if he like tossed him off or whatnot, but he didn't hit the mat, and like the back of his head like hit the cement, and it's like
Yeah.
what was like going through your mind when you saw that? Because that was just oh
That one hurt. Like that wasn't even that far of a drop either compared to some of the other things I've seen, but it's still just realizing how fragile we are as humans. And especially Matt, who, seeing what he went through throughout the 2000s with Jeff, Edge and Christian and the Dudley Boys, and then seeing that happen, it's just like, he's already banged up, and then that happens. Please just don't get him killed. That was my main concern, was, oh my God, I hope he's just okay. Like, not even can he wrestle again? I just hope he's okay.
Yeah, I think it's crazy the amount of risks that like professional wrestlers will take. Like if you look at like what people will do in like CZW or GCW and like their extreme matches, it's just insane for people to not necessarily understand professional wrestling or the risks that you guys take. So like what would you put into your own words as far as that goes? Like the amount of risks that you guys actually do take, or what you recognize as a professional wrestling fan or a professional wrestler?
For me, especially remembering how simple the drill was that tore my PCL, and just being like, this is something that you see very commonly in wrestling matches, and now I have to put my knee in a brace and I can't walk right for a few weeks. So even seeing crazy things like that, or like going to the last Prestige Roseland show where we had the ladder match between Midnight Heat and C4, and recognizing how dangerous those are, like, that's an actual ladder they're having to climb up, and if they fell outside of the ring, we have no padding outside of the ring at Roseland shows. The only padding that we even have remotely is inside the ring. And if you so much as land wrong, if you don't catch your head, which I've done, I've caught a few concussions myself, which mine were fortunately mild, but like concussions or landing wrong outside the ring or even just catching yourself wrong could lead to very serious consequences. Like I injured my knee about a year ago, and there are still days that sitting down, standing up, walking upstairs are a bit of a challenge sometimes, especially around this time of year when it gets colder out.
Yeah.
Which fortunately, I feel like people are becoming more and more aware of. I don't have to tell people as often when I mention pro wrestling, they go, you know, that's fake, right? I feel like they're more so talking about how, yes, this is a show. Yes, this stuff does get planned out ahead of time. But also, if you see someone get picked up and slammed on the ground, you just saw someone get picked up and slammed full force onto the ground. There's no faking that.
Yeah.
There's no faking Hulk Hogan picking up Andre the Giant and then slamming him at WrestleMania. Hulk Hogan just picked up Andre the Giant and
Mhm.
slammed him onto his already hurt back at WrestleMania.
Yeah. 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 So, what is your, I guess, opinion on just because like we had kind of like touched a little bit earlier on maybe kind of being a little bit misunderstood. So, like, do you kind of like feel that kind of relation with Andre the Giant and everything that he had to kind of go through throughout his career as far as that misunderstoodness?
Oh, I am not going to remotely compare what I go through to Andre because the biggest problems I face, being as big as I am, is like fitting between a large and an extra large shirt, depending on where you get them, because obviously the biggest struggle, no two companies size their shirts the same. I have put on large shirts that fit me perfectly and large shirts that if I so much as raise my arm up to here, I'm wearing a crop top. Or extra large shirts that either also fit perfectly, they have a nice snug fit to them, but they're long enough that they fit my size and my height just fine. Or extra large shirts to where I feel like I'm the fat kid in school just trying to hide my baby fat. But compared to Andre, like he struggled just fitting on an airplane. So I definitely have my own challenges, which I feel like everyone struggles with them on their own level. Mine's just on the higher side of the spectrum because of how big I am compared to other people.
Mhm.
But these days, I feel like, especially as adults, I work around adults much more these days. We grow up, we realize, okay, stop making a big deal about it. He's just really tall. He's not weird, he's just tall. Then there's Andre, who just, I don't even want to imagine what life was like for him. Everywhere he went, obviously, because he was also a celebrity, everywhere he went, people recognized him, people kept pestering him. He couldn't fit into most rooms, let alone onto like beds or sitting on like even a toilet. I can imagine was difficult for him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what like to me just makes like him just absolutely amazing because like the only time in which he felt the most comfortable was when he was in a wrestling ring. And like that is just so admirable, you know?
Hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so like kind of like maybe to go off to a different wrestler, what was your reaction when CM Punk had actually made not only his AEW debut, but maybe his WWE return? Like,
So if you look at Antarctica and then you look at Costa Rica, they're very different temperatures, right? That's how I felt between his return to wrestling in AEW and his return to WWE. This is probably going to get me into most trouble of anything we ever talk about on here. His return to AEW actually made me cry. Like that feeling of watching someone who fell out of love with something he loved his whole life since he was a kid, falling back in love with it so many years later and seeing CM Punk get teary-eyed, seeing that guy in the crowd who was reaching out to him crying. That stuff really got to me, and I actually got very visibly emotional watching it. Fast forward to like his return to AEW on Collision, fast forward to his return to WWE recently. I was surprised, honestly, I was surprised to see him return to WWE. But at this point, I'm just like, okay, I just don't really care much about what CM Punk does anymore. After the whole Collision thing and his actual hated rivalry with the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, I'm just like, I'm just done with this level of real life drama, to the point that it's actually becoming difficult for people to do their jobs. Like, I understand you're not going to get along with everyone you work with. There are going to be arguments. But when it gets to the point that you're having actual fights backstage that lead to multiple people not being able to work, and then you come out of it not acting like, okay, that wasn't our best moment. Yeah, I'm going to do better. But coming out of it just being like, no, I'm right. I'm the hero here. They're the bad guys. I just feel like, wasn't high school like 10 years ago for some of us? Like, I understand, like, this is a huge, pro wrestling is basically one huge drama. It's like a male soap opera that we're watching on TV, as I've heard it described, like on the show Glow. They described it as a soap opera. And that's basically what wrestling is sometimes. Is you're watching two guys wearing Speedos wrestling over a giant golden belt, acting like their lives are on the line. But then all that stuff that happened between the Elite and CM Punk, I'm just like, this is starting to get to the point that's like, guys, enough. We get it. You all think you're awesome. We think you're awesome. Can we go back to just being awesome and just leave this in the past? And CM Punk, unfortunately, in my opinion, said, no, we're not done here. I am going to feel validated and vindicated. And that's the point that I was like, okay, this is not 2011 pipe bomb CM Punk. This is now 2022, 2023 CM Punk being like, no, I'm the awesome one here. And I'm just like, I thought you were, but now I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like he definitely left a lot of people kind of like disappointed as far as just his overall attitude towards professional wrestling, especially given how he left WWE and what he was trying to say. It's really crazy.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing too, is when he left WWE in 2014, I honestly thought, good for him. If he's decided he's just done with WWE, he's not satisfied here, I don't know if I would have done it the same way. But I mean, at that point, we all thought, oh, CM Punk has left the building and he's never coming back. He's just decided he's done with pro wrestling. Good for him. If something doesn't make you happy anymore, by all means, go find something else that makes you happy. I'm never going to judge you for that. But when it gets to that point of feeling like he's just being so petty that he can't help himself, that's when it crosses the line, in my opinion.
Yeah. So like to kind of like coordinate with that before we actually head into AEW Double or Nothing 2019, I want to ask you about Cody Rhodes' return to WWE. Like, how surprised were you during that whole time period?
That one didn't surprise me as much, really, because like during the match with Seth, the lights went out for like a million years, and I was just sitting there going, okay, who's it going to be? I've got three people in mind that this could be, and Cody is one of them, but he's at the bottom of that list. Mm-hmm. And then Cody comes out, and I'm just like, oh, wow. I was more surprised that they gave him his American Nightmare entrance, his theme song, and he got to come out wearing the Homelander American Revolution looking jacket that he got to wear, which I was happy to see him back. I just hoped that it went better than his last little run in AEW went, because that one started to feel like, okay, we get it, Cody. You're the American Nightmare. You're really cool, but you got anything a bit more fresh for us? as a lot of people were feeling at that time. So I was looking forward to seeing something new, both in Cody Rhodes and WWE, and finding out that when he met with Vince and he said, I don't want to change anything about the American Nightmare. And Vince said, well, hell, why'd you think we wanted to change it? Basically saying, oh, we don't want to change anything either. What you're doing is great. We don't want to touch it. We just want you to bring it to us. And that surprised me too, just feeling like, wow, Vince actually likes someone else's idea and isn't afraid to acknowledge it.
Yeah, that is so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So here's an interesting question that I wanted to ask you. Do you believe, or maybe have a opinion on just where AEW is at this moment, especially given the fact that, like to me, AEW hasn't felt as important or as a must-see show like they were when they had AEW Double or Nothing in 2019, because it was so intense, and I haven't felt that intensity from AEW since then. And then especially with, going along with that, having Cody Rhodes and CM Punk essentially jump ship, like, have you kind of felt like they haven't been able to gravitate that amount of energy since their first show?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because when they first came out with Double or Nothing, it actually felt like, oh my God, this is a revolution in pro wrestling. We're getting to see a new promised land and competition for WWE like we haven't seen in a long time. And then, like you said, people like Jade Cargill, Cody Rhodes, CM Punk have all now jumped ship back to WWE. It's starting to feel like, okay, yeah, AEW's had problems that people were pointing out even as far back as the early days, when it still felt like, oh, this is the new promised land for pro wrestlers who want to get away from the WWE-ness of WWE. But after a while, it started to feel like, oh, so y'all are still just going to ignore these problems we talked about. Okay, so you're just going to do your own thing then. And I feel like the hype, as well as just the hope of AEW being different, has started to dwindle to the point that now it just feels like, oh, it's just another pro wrestling company at this point, which I still feel like the world is a better place for AEW being around, because if nothing else, it gives other wrestlers an opportunity to be like, well, this didn't work out for me. I can go here and see how that fits. But it's not at all the same, oh my God, it's AEW, as it was just a few years ago.
Yeah. So, like, what was one aspect that maybe they brought that, like, just really just didn't make you believe, I guess, not believe in the company, but just believe where they would actually end up? Because, like, and before you answer, one of the main things that I noticed when it comes to AEW, that it didn't make me feel like Tony Khan was serious, was when he was sitting there and, like, hugging Cesaro by, like, his waist, and, like, just absolutely being like a fanboy of, who he was holding. And it's like, dude, like, you're a billionaire, and, like, you're the president of a major company that you want to build. So, like, what are you actually giving us right now when you do something like that? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that was a big one for me, was how much Tony Khan doesn't strike me as a very strong leader. He strikes me as, like you said, he's a wrestling fan, but he's also a very skittish one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, his reaction to a lot of problems that AEW has had has mostly just been the wide-eyed, oh my gosh, what's going on? What's happening around me look, compared to someone like, as much as I'm not a fan of the guy, Vince McMahon charges in head full of steam so fast that he doesn't have time to limber up, and he tears both quads, addressing a problem like, oh my gosh, two people just won the Royal Rumble. What do we do? Like, even something like that, Vince charges in full steam, just being like, all right, that's it. We're going to fix this right now. So it just felt like, oh, this is the guy that's supposed to be running the company, and he acts like a kid meeting his new favorite wrestler, which I still also get excited when I meet wrestlers, as I hope anyone does. But there's a
Yeah.
difference between getting excited and feeling excited and acting childlike. Like you said, hugging Cesaro or Claudio by the waist, like he's a kid who just met Superman and now he's hugging Superman. I'm just like, yeah, you're supposed to be the billionaire president of this company and you don't look it.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. And
that's a
it
that's
was
a
also
solid red
just
flag.
like, yeah. Yeah. It was also just like his, I guess, like his whole demeanor whenever he is kind of trying to go and justify why something is happening in the company, even though fans are trying to tell him, like, hey, this is the problem that we have. It's almost like could you imagine Vince McMahon going out and actually retweeting somebody's tweet and trying to defend his product? Like, he doesn't need to defend it. Like, the product itself is going to defend it. It's like, oh.
Yeah. One of my
Yeah.
favorite quotes from Game of Thrones is, "No true king has to say that he is the king." Like, that's another problem, is Tony Khan keeps trying to fuel the flames of this war going on between WWE and AEW when most other people are just like, I don't know, just put on a better show than them and quit talking about it. Like, especially me, I'm very much don't talk about it, just do it kind of person. Like,
Yeah.
if you're talking about, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, I feel like that's a lot of time you're spending talking about doing something, but not actually doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's
Especially,
like, do you go ahead?
oh, I was going to say, especially when like AEW and WWE had their head-to-head show recently where they were both going to do a show at the exact same time and see who came out with the better ratings. And Tony spent the whole time talking about, oh, we're going to do so much better than WWE. We're going to get better ratings than WWE. And they didn't. And Tony Khan's immediate reaction was, yeah, well, those are some very popular wrestlers in WWE that didn't get the same level of viewership they normally get. And everyone else was just like, yeah, but you still got even less viewers than them, and you had Edge and Christian on your show. Way to bury your own talent trying to make the other guy look bad.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, do you kind of feel like, yes, AEW has been able to maybe build some homegrown talent like Darby Allin or MJF or Jungle Boy or whatever, but there's still like this string of superstars that they had potential to build, and they decided to push those other people before it and kind of make those other people irrelevant, even though they were still signed to the company or trying to build a name for themselves. And that's where I kind of feel like AEW can be good for a wrestler, but it can also be kind of a detriment depending on who you are as a professional wrestler.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely seen a lot of that in person as well. Some of the wrestlers I've met at some of the shows I work at are people who have worked for AEW and have said that, I don't want to name names or say exact quotes, but they have said things either to me or some of my friends that are just like, yeah, it's not as great as people try to make it out to be.
Damn,
So
that's crazy.
yeah, that's why I say it's not the promised land it tries to act like it is. But at the end of the day, it is still another wrestling company that is providing people with jobs and paying people. And it's also another opportunity for people to say, well, this place didn't work out. Let's see if this one does.
Yeah. Yeah, here's a really interesting perspective I want to get your opinion on. Is like, one thing that AEW tried to introduce was the whole record system. But like to me, like they didn't hold that record system in place to actually be able to build storylines or find a number one contender. And so do you think that professional wrestling could actually benefit from having a record system where then you can look at somebody and maybe they're 10-0 and then their opponent is 10-1, and then now it's, can this person finally beat them and actually give them their first loss and have that be the foundation of a whole storyline?
If very carefully done, yes, that can absolutely happen. But it has to be turned into like a Asuka undefeated in NXT, Goldberg undefeated in WCW level of this person is on a tear and hasn't been beaten once. Can this next opponent, who is also a great wrestler, actually hand them their first loss? Like, I compare it to how AEW handled their record system of, oh, this person's 19-1, this person's 18-0, this person's 17-2. Therefore, who gets the championship match? Is it the person who's 19-1 or 18-0? I'm like, that is such an easy way to book yourself into a corner of being like, well, we lost track that this guy has won 18 matches without losing once, but we really like the guy who's won 19 matches, but he lost that one. So now what do we do? I feel like it's a very careful balance of introduce it if you can make a story behind it, but don't constantly hold that in the air. Like, by the way, this is a thing that's happening and we have to play by these rules even when we don't want to.
Yeah.
I feel like
I think that would be so interesting to actually have a wrestling company like introduce that aspect and like really take it seriously, because then like you could even build a storyline. Like, let's say, you know, two wrestlers have fought 4 different times. 3 of the times one of the wrestlers has won, and then you can actually build a story off of saying like they've fought 4 different times, but he's only won 75% of, or 25% of their overall battles. And you know what I mean? Like you can really get really detailed with everything. And I think it would just be amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something like that absolutely could work. Like, another favorite match of mine that happened a bit more recently was Omega versus Okada 3, because the first Omega Okada won. The second match came to a time limit draw. So once again, Kenny has had 2 matches with Okada, hasn't beaten him once. Going into the third match, the commentators even say all Okada has to do is not lose this match, and he advances in this tournament they're having. Omega has to win if he wants any chance of advancing. But Okada fights the match like, no, I don't care about this tournament. I need to beat this guy, because how dare he fight me to a draw last time we were in the ring together. Like, I need to prove that, no, I can beat this guy. Last time was a fluke that he managed to survive to a time limit draw. I'm going to beat him. And that's how we got this awesome match of Omega's trying to prove that he can beat Okada. Okada's trying to prove that, no, I'm better than Omega. Last match doesn't mean anything. So something like that could absolutely work.
Yeah, that would be absolutely crazy to actually see come to fruition. So here's a question, just because you had kind of just brought up about a kind of like a favorite match that was recent. Is there any WrestleMania match that you feel is one of the worst of all time? And I'll share with you my perspective afterward.
Oh, you're gonna wait till I share mine? Oh, I actually have to think of an answer now. Possibly recency bias. One that I absolutely hated was the Fiend Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton, because 95% of that match was awesome. Seeing Bray Wyatt return in the Jack in the Box, seeing him get to pay tribute to Brody Lee at WrestleMania was awesome. Like, I actually started getting misty-eyed watching that. Then the end happens, and I'm just like, so what is this? What am I watching? Like, the hype immediately went from here and just plummeted. So as far as like great highs and then immediately dropping to great lows and just feeling my heart sink. And then there are matches like I would say the first one that comes to my mind was Undertaker versus Giant Gonzalez at WrestleMania 9, I think that was. Just because it felt like watching Undertaker, who even back then still one of my favorites to watch, his whole you can hit him as hard as you can and he won't feel it, versus this guy who is actually bigger than him. The problem is he's so much bigger that he's struggling to even move. And the match ends with a disqualification because he used a cloth to cover Undertaker's face, to the point that even going into some of his more recent WrestleMania matches, people were like, "Wait, does that match with Giant Gonzalez count as one of his wins? Because he technically got knocked out by a cloth." And other people are like, "Well, yeah, it counts because he still won by disqualification. It's still a win. Giant Gonzalez still lost the match." So I'm just like, just so much about that match is just, why did this match even happen? I realize it's the early 90s of pro wrestling, but still, why did that match have to happen? It still baffles me to this day. I can't even find words to describe it. That's how much it baffles me.
Yeah. Yeah, well, before we start to get into John Cena, his one of his WrestleMania matches to me was probably one of like the worst of all time, and that was the Undertaker versus John Cena. Because like had we gotten it 10 years prior around WrestleMania 22, 23, 24, it would have been an absolute banger. But because of the fact that they were so old and it was so into their career, like we got a bullshit like few minute match and then that was it, where it was just, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that one was a weird one because for me, I didn't mind the match when I was watching it at first. It just felt like, oh, this is cool. We're seeing John Cena versus Undertaker. It's short because, like you said, they're not young stallions anymore. Especially Undertaker was still trying to find that last good match to end his career and hang his hat on. But then, like you said, especially finding out later that Undertaker felt the same way, like, yeah, no, that match should have been a lot better than it was, putting me and John in the ring together. Then it started to feel like, oh, we find out later that match could have actually been a lot longer and an actual match and not just John Cena gets his ass kicked by Undertaker for a few minutes. Then, yeah, that was definitely more disappointing in hindsight.
Yeah, definitely. So, like, what is your overall opinion of John Cena's career? And then again, I'll expand on it after you.
Overall, I definitely appreciate a lot of what he did for wrestling. I don't think he's the best thing to ever happen to wrestling, but then again, I don't know if anyone could be called the best thing to ever happen to wrestling. I just think a lot of what people's problems with John Cena are boiled down to the fact that WWE builds itself on there has to be one person at the top, at the pinnacle of everything. And he was just the guy who was chosen to fill that role. I feel like he did a great job filling that role. There were definitely some hiccups, some very big hiccups along the way. But overall, I feel like he did a great job. He's definitely talented, especially when he feels very motivated. His United States Championship run was a huge highlight, not only giving some younger stars and some less appreciated stars a chance to shine on TV, but also giving him a chance to actually try some new moves, like his springboard stunner move that he started doing. I remember seeing that and going, "What's he doing? That's not John Cena. That's not one of his normal moves. Is he actually trying new stuff?" So
Yeah,
overall, I still like John Cena. I think he's a cool dude. I think he's a great wrestler. I just feel like he is not so much the problem. He is the face of what the real problem is.
Yeah, but here's a interesting kind of perspective in which I can get based off of that is like one thing that I've always explained to people as to the reason why I don't like I respect John Cena for his overall, character and what he does for the kids or Make a Wish and all of that. I like absolutely respect that. It's was just like you were bringing up, like the amount of times that we've seen him in the WWE championship picture that like people don't like. They don't like for somebody to just be that pinnacle superstar. And one thing that I wanted to ask you is like, do you think that there was at least some point in John Cena's career where he could have gone to Vince McMahon with the respect that he had in the WWE backstage area and told him like, I don't feel like I need to be in the WWE championship position. Like you should give it to somebody else. Or like, do you feel like maybe that was just something he just didn't feel like doing? He was just going to take the opportunity and run with it.
I definitely think he was the kind of guy who, especially with how much responsibility he put on himself outside of WWE, he felt like if they're going to put me on the top and give me all of this money and all these opportunities, I'm not going to say no, even though I'm John Cena. When people think wrestling, they think of me. I feel like knowing how much he put himself through outside of the ring, I feel like there was no way he was ever going to say, no, don't give me the WWE championship, give it to somebody else. But personally, I do feel like there were times that it should have gone to somebody else, even if it's just like he shouldn't have beaten AJ Styles for it to become 16-time champion, which people will argue with me about, and that's fine. It's just my opinion. But I can't think of any one particular time that really felt like John Cena shouldn't have been in the WWE championship picture that somebody else absolutely should have.
Yeah.
Granted, that's a long history of John being at the top for me to look through and just say, oh, this person definitely should have been at the top, not John.
Mm-hmm.
Which my brain is just not capable of remembering at this time.
So we're like when you're actually like going through training, and if you're able to like build a character for yourself, which characters would you mostly adapt to that like you want to bring with your whole overall character?
One person that I tend to compare my image of myself as a wrestler to the most would be someone like Bane from The Dark Knight Rises. Very strong, hard-hitting, but soft-spoken. Like, I don't talk unless I have something to say, but when I have something to say, I will make you listen.
Oh, that is so awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so like what can we expect from your future when it comes to professional wrestling? Like, what do you have in mind?
I don't even know if I can answer that, because if you asked me a year and a half ago, I would have said I'd be at least having had my first match by now, if not already wrestling regularly. But here we are, 2024 is right around the corner, and I haven't had my first match yet, and I'm still taking a break from training full time. So hopefully, like I said earlier, by this time next year, be in the ring having matches by that time. But you never know. I could be wrestling a year from now. I could have life circumstances from any source come in and just say, no, wrestling isn't happening for you. It was a fun ride, but that ride's over now. It's time to get back to whatever life actually has in store for me. Which as much as I'm going to probably have a hard time accepting any negatives that come to me in the next year or in the future, I do try to maintain this mentality of whatever happens, happens. And at least in 30, 40 years from now, I'll be able to look back and say, I gave it a shot.
That is really, really cool. That is really cool. So like, just to like kind of like end everything out here. So like, what does professional wrestling mean to you, and like what exactly, like just what does it mean to you to be able to even try to become a professional wrestler?
For me, it is a chance to feel like I am, especially if I do become a pro wrestler, it's a chance to feel like you're actually a real life superhero or a real life supervillain in people's lives. Like someone who they can reach out and see, oh, this is an actual person standing in front of me doing superhuman things. And I can reach out and actually touch them, shake their hand, take a picture with them. This is real life. And this is something that I can actually see and aspire to. And this is something I could potentially do someday. Because some of my friends have said they've had some of the lowest lows and then come to the highest highs because their favorite wrestler did something amazing that spoke to them, whether it was something they said in a promo or if they won a big championship or they achieved some crazy goal that they said, no one told me this was possible. Everyone said this is never happening, but I just made it happen. Like Rey Mysterio winning the World Championship, Jeff Hardy winning the WWE Championship, Jon Moxley becoming a multi-time world champion between WWE and AEW. Things like that, where you feel like, oh, this outsider, this somebody who people said was a nobody is not only a somebody, they're a world champion. They've reached the mountaintop. They've achieved everything they wanted to. And that can be you.
That is so freaking awesome. Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to thank you for actually joining me here tonight, man. Like, it has been an absolute pleasure to sit down, just kind of pick your mind a little bit when it comes to professional wrestling.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. This was fun.
All right. Well, I hope to talk to you soon, and I hope one day I can actually come up and meet you.
Absolutely, man. Looking forward to it.
All right, have a good night.
See ya.
You guys, whoop, my bad. There you go. All right, you guys. So that was Interesting's podcast, episode 82 with Sam BILYEU. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, and ring that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I upload content. Make sure to go and follow me on social media at CodyT503. That's Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And remember, in just 6 days, December 16th, Interesting Podcast is going to be celebrating its 1-year anniversary. And this is going to be another podcast you guys are not going to want to miss. So make sure you guys ring that notification bell so you guys wouldn't get notified whenever I go live. I'll catch you guys later.